everybody, this is Diana from So Very Crafty, and we are here today to make this super simple beginner quilting project. Yes, it is a quilting project, but it's super simple. It's a hexagonal table topper that any beginner sewist can make in no time. I will show you step by step how to make this project, and I hope you enjoy it today. It's a fun one for a beginner quilter slash sewist. I'm not much of a quilter myself, though I have done some quilting projects. If you want to see some of my quilting projects over on the blog, head over to www.soverycrafty.com, and I have a few of my quilting efforts over there. In fact, I have a beautiful sewing machine cover that I made recently that is a quilting project that came out very nicely, I thought, from an idea that I got from Jedi Craft Girl. I just love it. Covers my sewing machine every night, and so that's some of my quilting efforts over at the blog that will show you step by step how to make that project if you're interested. But this one is a beginner quilting project that anyone can make, so I urge you to give this one a try. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ding that bell for notifications, and definitely head over to the website. And that's it for today. So let's get started on how to make this super simple hexagonal table topper. So, how do we make this terrific little table topper? So simple. Even if you've never done a quilt before, this is the most beginner quilt ever. The first thing you're going to do is you are going to cut 2.5-inch strips of fabric. And you can cut 5 different strips, or you can have alternating strips. You can have all the same strips, whatever you like, but they need to be 5 of them. And when I say the width of your fabric, I mean exactly that. The width of your fabric. And you notice that when you buy your fabric, it's folded, so it makes it easy. So you just cut 2.5 inches times the width of your fabric, and you're going to have 5 pieces of that. And I've done this already for you so that we can get moving on our project here. Now, the first thing that we are going to want to do is we need to cut off our selvages. And the selvage ends are the ends here that have the, either sometimes they have writing on the ends or they're raggedy on the ends, but that's where the loom of the loom attaches to the fabric while it's creating it. And so we are going to cut off those selvage edges on each of our fabrics. So we want them all to go in the same direction here so that we can use our rotary cutter and mat to do that. The next thing that we're going to need is a ruler that has straight lines, and more importantly for this project, has these angled lines. And these are degree lines. So we have 60 degrees, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, and that's it. And you have them on both ends. I'm going to take my ruler here, and I'm just going to cut off these selvage ends on all 5 of my pieces here, just like that. The next thing that we are going to do is we're going to stitch these pieces together. Now, how you stitch them together is going to determine the pattern that you want on your table topper. Now, for me, I want to have this blue fabric in the middle. I want to have this blue fabric in the middle, and I'm going to put my flower fabric on either side of my blue fabric and the green fabric on the outsides. I just use remnants here that I had on hand, but you can use whatever you like for your project. I like to use what I have on hand because I have a lot of remnants in my stash. One of these days I'll have to show you my stash of fabric that I have accumulated over the years. But I'm going to place each of these pieces. We're going to unfold them, and I'm going to place each piece right sides together, and I'm going to stitch them together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. One thing that you will learn about quilting is that it almost always uniformly uses a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to stitch each of these pieces of fabric together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance in the same order that I have lined them up here on my workstation. And that is important, like I said, when it comes to how I want my table topper to look. If you're using 5 different pieces of fabric, it may not matter so much because you'll have just a random set of colors in your table topper. But mine's going to be kind of uniform. So we are going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch these together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to stitch all 5 of these pieces of fabric together using that 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now we have stitched our strips together, and now comes the hard part, though it's really not that hard, to be honest. You're going to take your quilting ruler, and you're going to see a 60-inch or 60-degree angle on your quilting ruler. And you are going to place that 60-degree mark on the bottom of your I almost used 45 degrees. Your 60-degree mark on the bottom of your set of 5 strips, making sure that the corner of your ruler, or that your ruler is going through the corner of your fabric pieces. But you still want to make sure that this is 60 degrees right on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that on the video. I may have to move this up a little bit. But this is my 60-degree mark right here. I'm making it level with the bottom of my fabric piece. I'm sliding it across until my ruler reaches the corner up here of my fabric pieces. And then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm just going to slice this part off. And I'm going to throw that away. I don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take my 60-degree mark. I'm going to place it on the bottom, and I'm going to make a triangle out of this. So I have my 60-degree mark. And I'm just sliding it right across here on the bottom so that the point, my ruler point, meets the point of the fabric here. And I've got my 60-degree mark along the bottom. And I'm just going to cut. And that's one of my triangles. And I'm going to continue to do that same thing all the way down my project here until I have all of my triangles. And you will see that we will have just enough triangles to create our table topper. You want to try to be as exact as you can with this. And here we go for our second triangle. Okay, so we have 6 triangles. Now it's time to put our triangles together. And we are going to stitch these triangles 3 and 3. So the first thing we're going to do is stitch 2 of our triangles together. And then stitch the third triangle together. And we're going to place those triangles right sides together. So let's head over to the sewing machine and let's stitch these triangles 3 by 3, and then we'll come over and do our next step. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I have all of my triangles here. I'm going to place 2 of them right sides together. And I want to match up these seams to make sure that my seams are where they need to be. Now, if you want to, you can pin these together, but I'm not going to. If you're a more beginner sewist, you'll want to pin these. You may want to just pin them right where the seams are, but this is just a small seam, so I'm not going to pin them together. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this is where a 1/4 inch foot really comes in handy. If your machine does not come with a 1/4 inch foot, I encourage you to try and get one for your machine. It is well worth the effort to get one because it really comes in handy for a lot of different applications. I use my 1/4 inch foot all the time. So let's stitch these 2 triangles together using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to start here at the top. And again, I want to make sure that my seams are in alignment. Now you could press these seams open if you wanted to. It's up to you. And I'm just making sure that my seams are lined up and that my bottom is aligned as well. These bottom raw edges are aligned as well. Now we have 2 of our triangles joined together here, and you can see that our pattern for our table topper is starting to take shape. So let's add a 3rd triangle to these triangles and see how that looks. And again, we're going to place this right sides together. Now you can see that we have half of our table topper. We're going to set this aside and we're just going to stitch the 3 other triangles in exactly the same way. Now we've finished 2 sides of our table topper, and you can see that it's coming together nicely. Now all we need to do is flip these over and stitch a straight seam right across the middle to join these 2 pieces together. So I'm going to head to the sewing machine and I'm going to join these 2 pieces together using a straight seam. Okay, now our table topper is all together the way that it should be. But that's not the end of the project. We need to add some batting, and I have some scraps of batting here, and I am simply going to use my table topper as a template for the batting that I'm going to use for this project. I'm going to take my my scissors and I'm just going to cut around this to get exactly how much batting I need for my table topper. So now we have now we have our batting for our table topper, and that's going to go in the middle, but not right now. We also need to have some backing for our table topper, and you can use whatever you like. I was hoping to use this flower fabric, but I don't think I have enough of it to be able to use that. That's all I have left in my remnant stash. But I have a lot of this blue, so I'm going to use this blue Kona as the back of my table topper. And again, I'm just going to use my table topper as my template to cut out the back here. So it looks like our table topper is going to be wider than a half of my cotton fabric. So let's just cut this in half and make it easier to work with. And now we have plenty. And again, I'm just going to use my table topper as a template, or a pattern, if you will, to cut out the backing. Now, because this is a beginner little quilting project, we are not going to be using bias binding today. In most quilts, you will notice that they are bound using bias binding or straight edge binding to bind the batting of your quilt to the outside of your quilt and to the quilt top. But we're not going to do that today because this is a beginner project and many of you don't know how to use bias binding. So we are going to not use bias binding for this project. So there's the back of our table topper. And we have the batting of our table topper. Now, this may seem a little counterintuitive, but we are going to stitch these pieces together in this order. That way, when we turn this project right sides out, our batting is going to be in the middle of our project. So I'm going to use some clips here and clip these corners together to make sure that my table topper is aligned with all of my corners. Now, if you're just a beginner, you may want to use more clips than what I'm using here. To keep it a little more stable. And once we've done that, we are going to stitch all the way around our table topper using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we're going to leave an opening on one of these sides so that we can turn this project right sides out. So let's head over to the sewing machine and let's take care of that. So here we are back at the workstation. We're just going to reach inside and we're going to turn our topper right sides out. And you will see that our quilt batting is on the inside and our top is on the outside and our back is on the outside. And we're just going to poke out our corners here. And there's our table topper, but we're not quite finished yet. We need to close in this opening and we need to do a little bit of quilting. And all quilting is really stitching through all 3 of these layers so that you can have a nice product that is all stitched together. Now you can do an all over quilting on this project if you want, but I'm just going to do a very simple quilting process. And that is, I am going to stitch all around where these seams are. I'm going to start out by stitching along the edge to enclose this raw edge. So we'll do a top stitch all around the edge of our topper. And then we'll do what's called stitching in the ditch. And we will stitch in the ditch all around each of our seams. And then we'll be finished with this project. Okay, here we are back at the sewing machine. And I am going to switch out my bobbin color because I have the blue on the bottom of my table topper, and I don't necessarily want the green to show through. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch around the edge of my table topper so that I can enclose that raw edge where I left the opening. And I'm using about an 1/8 inch seam allowance here. Okay, so there we have our top stitch of our outer edge, and we've enclosed the raw edge that we used for turning. Now the stitching in the ditch part is pretty simple. We're just going to place our needle in the seam where we stitched our triangles together. Now there is such a thing as a stitch in the ditch foot, but I don't have one, so we're just going to use our 1/4 inch foot for this and pay very close attention to where our needle is going. And that's really all there is to stitching in the ditch, is just doing that. I'm not going to complete this we're just going to head over to the sewing or to the workstation and show off this project. So that's it for this project for today. All you need to do is finish stitching in the ditch all the way around your project, and you have finished. And as you can see, the quilting will show up on the back part of our project once we're finished. And that's all there is to making this super simple hexagonal table topper that any beginner sewist can make. And you can make this any color that you like. I chose this because I had these fabrics on hand, and I hate to waste fabrics. So like I said, one of these days I will show you my little fabric stash where I draw on some of these fabrics. I buy remnants a lot from Joann's, and these are some of those remnants. Some of them are Kona cotton that I love to use, even though they are a little stretchy. I still like to use them. So that's it for our project for today. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a simple one. Even though there's a little bit of measuring with the 60-degree angle, it is a super simple project, and I hope you'll give this one a try. That's it for today, and I will see you guys next time on So Very Crafty. But if you enjoyed this project, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ding that bell for notifications, and head over to the website at www.soverycrafty.com for more sewing and crafting tutorials that you won't find here on the YouTube channel. And that's it for today, so I will see you guys next time. Bye.